Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to just get right to the idea, and obviously it's the moderator's decision what they choose to ask about, but coming off of a shooting that we had where 3 people were killed today on a college campus in Nevada, why do you think that was not, the idea of gun control, gun legislation was not discussed tonight or even brought up among any of you?
Well, look, I can speak to my views on it. I can't speak to the topic selection. I was prepared to discuss it, and I do think it's a tragedy what happened. I mean, it's a travesty, and this should not be happening in our country. I do think we need to get to the mental health epidemic. That's the root cause of it. And I do believe that I was the closest candidate that did get to discussing that issue. A mental health epidemic, a void of purpose and meaning. I did talk about that on the debate stage, and I do think that that's an under-discussed issue. You're right. And I do think that if we're going to fix some of our national identity crisis as a country, fix this epidemic of violence along with it, we have to get to that root cause. And I favor that. I've offered constructive solutions to bring back mental health institutions and otherwise. But I do think that it's going to take leadership from both parties. I'm going to lead the Republican Party to do it, to be able to bring back that level of mental health care we need in this country. And so we don't have all the facts about this shooter, but I'm responding based on the last mass shooting in Maine and so many others like it, where someone with mental health problems has been, you know, doing things that they otherwise shouldn't do. And I think that that's sad. It's a travesty, and my heart goes out to those families.
Allow me, if you would, to just indulge me, I guess, because if I had moderated, we would have been talking about this. And so I do want to just ask one more about that. With regard to the idea of this is a mental health issue, other countries have a lot of people who have mental health issues, and yet we don't see the same kind of gun violence in other countries outside of the United States. And so you don't think that the remedy at all has anything to do with gun control or legislation?
So I don't think that that's actually the right target, because if you look even within the United States, the regions of the country that has the greatest tighter gun control laws are also the ones with the greatest gun-related violence. And so I think there's a couple things going on, Lindsay, is we do have a rising tide of mental health epidemic in the United States that's further than what we see in other countries. But in addition to that, you see, what do you see in Europe? You see people ramming trucks through crowds. You see people with stabbing attacks and otherwise. And so gun-related violence is bad. All homicidal violence is bad. All violence is bad. But I think that part of this spike we've seen correlates directly with the closure of those psychiatric institutions. And I, for one, stand for it. It's a somewhat controversial position to bring them back. And we know how to address this. More cops on the street who are able to do their jobs without fear of being sued, and then bring back those psychiatric institutions, which, as a side story, we talked about this on stage, that's a product of, what do you guess, lobbying. Pharmaceutical industry lobbying. That's a big part of what's actually driven the psychiatric institution closures, because it was convenient for the pharma industry to sell a lot of their atypical antipsychotics. But anyway, that's another example of getting to the root cause. That's what I support doing. And as I said, I can't speak for why it wasn't brought up, but I think you would have been right to bring it up, and I think it's an issue we should be engaging with.
You did have the greatest amount of speaking time tonight at about 22 minutes. You spent a lot of it going after your opponent, Nikki Haley, even sparring with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie for a bit. Let's take a listen.
You do this at every debate.
I'll tell you exactly what it was.
Don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Okay? You say this. You do this. You do this at every debate. You go out on the stump and you say something. All of us see it on video. We confront you on the debate stage. You say you didn't say it, and then you back away. And I want to say
what exactly what I said, Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Well, this is
now look.
This is nonsense. This man is spewing. This man is spewing nonsense.
Let me tell you something. This is the fourth debate. The fourth debate that you would be voted in the first 20 minutes as the most obnoxious blowhard in America. So shut up for a little while.
Obnoxious blowhard in America. Many of your marquee moments of the night were not just political attacks, but were more along the lines of being personal attacks. Is that your strategy going forward? Any regrets?
Well, I love how you did play a name call on me and then ask me about personal attacks. That's actually quite humorous to me, Lindsay. But I've seen a lot of that in this debate. I can handle it, and I don't mind. Can't handle the heat, you stay out of the kitchen. I spoke the truth to Chris Christie. His entirety of his foreign policy experience involves blockading a bridge from New Jersey to New York. So I gently encouraged him to get out of this race where he belongs. But I do think that more importantly, there's a policy divide, a deep ideological divide in the GOP on 2 issues. One of them is on foreign policy. I believe America is strongest when we are strongest starting at home. And I think one of the things we exposed tonight is look at both Nikki Haley and Chris Christie. two of the biggest war hawks in this race for Ukraine, couldn't even name accurately what the actual regions are of eastern Ukraine that are the subject of that conflict. This is a form of ideological fraud. It's intellectual fraud, the same intellectual fraud that got us into places like Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not helping us here in the United States of America by re-embracing these, I think, intellectual fraud neocons that are clamoring for war without actually even understanding what the objectives are in those wars or what regions they're even fighting for, yet sending our taxpayer money to do it. And then I think the second divide, which we didn't talk as much about tonight, but I think is really important in the GOP, we talked about it a little bit, is the protection of free speech. First Amendment rights. You have candidates who believe that the government needs to know, with government-issued ID, the profile of every social media user. That's Nikki Haley. We did talk about that, and I think that's important. That's not a personal attack. That is a deep ideological divide about what I see as a rise of a new form of fascism in the United States if we go to something that's other than a free and open internet. So those are the ideological divides. I stand on one side of that. I'm an unapologetic America First conservative who stands for the values of the Constitution and who stands for actually freedoms, including the First Amendment itself, who stands for George Washington's founding vision. I think it's ironic that Nikki Haley praised George Washington as the president she looks up to when George Washington's farewell 1796 address runs completely contrary to her vision of forking more money to Ukraine without a clear justification or reason why. And so this is, I think, the ideological divide in our party. I think that the debate stage is our time to have at it in the open with gloves off, and I think it gives GOP primary voters a great choice. I think there's a different side to this that grassroots campaigning is all about, which I'm doing bottom up as well. There's a time and place for everything, and a debate stage is where I think people want to know that if you're going to be facing off with Xi Jinping, I'm not going to be playing with kid gloves. The same goes for our opponents in this race.
One question that went unanswered tonight that we would like to get a direct answer to, obviously it was not to you at the time. Governor Chris Christie was posing it to Governor Ron DeSantis about, is Donald Trump fit for office? Just a yes or a no answer.
I think he's perfectly fit for office. Now, the question is, what choice do the voters want to make? I think I'm the best candidate to lead the America First agenda to the next level because I have fresh legs, because I can reach the next generation, and I'm making that case for me. But I don't believe in this mythology of disqualifying your opponents. Leave this to the voters. Let the voters decide. That's what I'm doing, and I'm making my case. But I would have answered that directly, and I'm answering directly to you. It wasn't asked to me, but I'll give you a straight answer.
The idea that just last night...
Think that,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say probably, we had time for probably one more question before we're being dragged out of
here. Okay, got it. The idea that Donald Trump just last night said that he would be a dictator on the first day, your response to that?
I mean, Lindsay, come on, he was joking. I mean, this is the classic example of the airlifting, and I've experienced some of this. I'm now much more sympathetic to even people like Trump who have experienced this at scale over 4 years in office. People have to watch the video of that, and I think anybody who's read that in print versus watching it in video understands the difference. And I don't think we're doing the voters or the viewers of this country a service by picking on some word he used out of context and then trying to make some sort of fiasco out of it. There's enough ideological divides in this country, including even within the Republican Party. Let's talk about those earnestly and honestly, and I think picking up on that joking dictator comment, I think is just a disservice to people who are reading print media but didn't actually see the interview.
Okay, and my last question, and I'm going to let you go. Right before the first debate, you were polling at 11% in Iowa. Now at the end of the fourth debate, you're polling at 4.8%. That's according to our partners at 538. You're going the wrong way. Why do you think that is?
Look, I think that after that first debate, you had a lot of campaigns that have been spreading a lot of, it's dirty sport of politics. Super PAC stuffing people's mailboxes, dedicating ads to it's what politics is all about, spreading false myths about me or otherwise. But the good news is the people of this country, I think, have been trained to see through that. So there's many cycles in a race. I think that the Iowa caucus is going to be a major catalyst for us. In many ways, we're sitting where we want to be. Expectations low going into that caucus. Many of the voters coming out to support us at our events, I mean, our crowd sizes are massive compared to what the mainstream media narrative is right now. Many of those people in Iowa have never been to a caucus event before, and they are not polled. So that's a big part of my voter base, people who are otherwise a little bit off the beaten track of a traditional GOP primary voter. If they do come out to the caucus, and we expect they will, I think there's a major surprise in store in January 15th. And so we're sitting exactly where we want to be, with the expectations set where they are. Shatter those, that's going to propel us forward, and I think that's the next major milestone in this race.
Also appreciate not only your time tonight, but you letting us know that little tidbit about Thomas Jefferson inventing the swivel chair. Didn't know that. Something to share at the next cocktail party. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Take care. Good seeing you, Lindsay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.